Okay, well, hi everybody. Welcome back. It's nice to have some repeat customers here for our 10-minute lesson. Again, I'm Alana Dunoff. You're a host for the next 10-15 minutes. For those who don't know me, I'm gonna make sure you get yourself on mute there. For those who don't know me, Alana Dunoff, and I about 30 years experience in facilities management, both as a strategic planner and project manager, and also as an FM educator, where I've been an adjunct professor for about 18 years. Currently teaching at Temple University in their facilities management bachelor's program. And I'm also a qualified instructor for the Pro FM and the IFMA FMP. And a shout out, because I got a couple of those students on both sides who have joined us today. So whoop, whoop. So today's topic is focusing on defining occupant services. And at the end here, I'm going to sort of wrap up. I want to talk about and give you some food for thought about looking at occupant services, not just sort of in our normal role, but even kind of like how we're living right now through the pandemic and what's happening at these moments. So I always like to start off with a little bit of level set, make sure we all understand what we mean by when we say occupant services. Sometimes they're called the soft services. And occupant services are everything that we provide from facilities for our people and our occupants beyond the operations of our building. So beyond the HVAC and the boiler and keeping the lights on, it's everything else that our people and our occupants need inside our building on a regular basis to be productive. And if you stop and look at this list, which every time I see this list of occupant services, I kind of go, oh my gosh, no wonder why we're so busy all of the time. Because this list, which is constantly ebbing and flowing for us in facilities management, there's so many things that we do and provide to the people in our organization to help them be productive that goes well beyond making sure people are too cold or, dealing with hot and cold issues. Custodial and cleaning services is certainly one of the biggest ones we think of when it comes to occupant services, but waste management is an occupant service, recycling, and if you have a food services program, what kind of silverware and flatware and dishes and things like that do you have? If you have a recycling program to make sure that those things are in sync, and who's buying the Keurig cups and the stirrers and the sugar packets, and if you have water filter systems. Some of you have parking or fleet services as part of the things that you provide to your occupants. And nowadays, you might even have car charging stations. Like that didn't happen a couple of years ago. So there's always new occupant services that we're adding to our list of things. Other occupant services are copy and printing shops and records management and shipping and mail and moves, ads, changes. Even our work and business continuity, which we've all been putting into play a lot in the past 8 months, is all part of the services we provide to our occupants. So there's just a host of things that we do to support the organization. And the question we have to figure out is, what of this massive list should we be providing, and how do we provide it? What level of service do we provide when we are giving it to our organizations, and what does that really look like? So our role in occupant services is pretty significant. It's about identifying the needs of our organization. What do the people need? What do the stakeholders need? And who are those stakeholders? Senior management, staff, the public, and what that looks like. And oftentimes when we think about occupant services and sort of where to start, like what of those 30, 40 things do we need to be doing? That it's also about looking at the organization's mission and vision and who they are as a company, and making sure that those services are in alignment, right? That we're providing the services. If our company is all about customer service and our company is all about sustainability, then some of the services, occupant service we will provide, will dovetail with those as well. We also want to think about the level of service. When it comes to all of those services, we could be at the top high-end white glove service, but we also might provide them on a smaller scale. So we need to decide that level and continuum of service. we're also responsible for enacting and executing on these services. So that means whether it happens internally or we're contracting these services outside, that we're managing that. And finally, we're also thinking about the constant monitoring and evaluating of those services. So I sort of mentioned that, there are services that we have on that list today that we didn't have 5 or 10 years ago. So we're always evaluating those services, making sure we're doing a good job. And if not, we streamline those processes and learn how to get better. But it's also about evaluating them and understanding what's new, what's next, what do we need now that we didn't need a couple years ago. One of the most important things about occupant service, though, is about meeting expectations. And I have a story that I want to share that I think really sort of defines that. Years ago, I had a student in my class who was complaining about an administrator, an admin, who was always busting his chops about custodial cleaning. And so one day she took a bunch of paper clips and she tossed them under her desk and she left for the night. And of course, she came back the next day, and yes, of course, those paper clips were still under her desk. And she picked up the phone and she started yelling at the FM saying, your custodial staff doesn't do their job. They don't clean the space. And he was telling the story as a story about, like, can you believe some people, like, they're so frustrating, the people in our buildings. And I said to him kind of sheepishly, I'm like, have you ever told her what the expectations were and what the plans were for cleaning? Does she know how frequently they vacuum? I mean, she might think they vacuum every night. And we all know we are not having that. Custodial is not vacuuming every night these days, right? They're only doing it really occasionally. And so he sort of was like, oh gosh, I never really thought about that before. But it's about meeting expectations and communicating those expectations. So when we provide services, we also need to be telling people what those services are and when to expect them. And that will really change the relationship. And also, if she really wants more cleaning, maybe their department's willing to pay for more of those services, but it can't necessarily be something you do automatically. So when you're trying to figure out what services you provide, one of the best ways to collect that information is to do some kind of survey to really understand about your occupants and understanding their needs, like the things they really need to do their job and the things that they would like to have, the things that are amenities and nice to haves, and the things that are enticing to bringing in a new generation of workers, right? Sometimes, companies do things and put a fitness center in, not because they think that everybody's going to use it, but because they think everybody thinks they're going to use it and sees it as a perk to come into the organization. But when you're thinking about collecting information, you want a survey that looks at things like, really understanding who are your occupants. Again, who are those stakeholders and how do they use the space? What are they doing? Are they in offices? Are they working together? Are they working by themselves? Are they collaborating? What does it look like to work and that style of work that they're used to? And how much time do they spend in the office? You don't want to provide services for people if they're not even in your office space. And so if they're not even around, why are you providing those services? And it also need to understand and ask questions about what do they need to be effective and efficient? And that, of course, has changed over the years as well. We used to need lots of printers and lots of copiers, and now we need a lot fewer of those. And maybe we don't need records management the same way, but there might be other services that we really need as well. And another really important part of that is about also assessing and evaluating those services on some regular basis to make sure we're doing it well, because we're always about continuous improvement, but it's also making sure that the services we're providing meet the right level of service and things that people are looking for, and if it's still relevant to the organization. One thing that I have sort of read and seen is talking about how do we define those levels of service for our organization for these occupant services. And I saw something pretty interesting that talked about how important it is to not just create a service level agreement with your vendors, which is how I think about an SLA, like it's the document that we use to define specifications for my outside vendors, but that actually to use that same document, that same information to create an occupant service level for my occupants inside our building, so that we have a document and a way of really communicating what's being provided to them, making sure their voices are heard. And it's sort of interesting. It's like really sort of saying, this is what we provide. This is the level of clean we're doing. This is the types of services we're providing. So they know what we're providing, and they can have that sort of expectation sort of built around that. And if it isn't quite right, we can adjust those along the way. So the last thing I want to share with you real quick, and something that I thought would be fun to get some quick feedback on, is that we know right now that occupant needs are changing, particularly in this moment. And I sort of wonder, because I've been hearing from colleagues and friends of how occupant services right now are changing. And if you feel like throwing something into the chat about what you're doing differently, if your occupants aren't in your building, and some of us don't have our people in our building, and even if we do have them in our building, those occupant services might be changing and adjusting. So I'm hearing FMs who now have home office setup programs, making sure there's ergonomic, equipment and amenities. Furniture delivery or procurement, people need chairs and needed better ways and places to work. I've heard about, services where the FMs are basically been packing up people's offices, months ago, and then therefore doing that. Happy hour meetings. Yay, I love happy hour meetings. That's awesome. Providing on-site food for free is another service that I have seen. And to Scott's point about the happy hours, I know a company that's also sort of randomly giving like company-wide days off and saying you absolutely can't positively not be on Zoom. It's like a Zoom off day and you have to be working really differently. So I think it's constantly, we're always thinking about how occupant services are changing. And the thing that I want to leave you with here, a little bit more open-ended, is I wonder, as we're shifting into sort of the next sort of unknown for a period of time, I really wonder where the new line is for us for facilities management. If normally our responsibilities are the buildings that we have, that we go to ensure people are safe and healthy and productive, what becomes our responsibility when we now have one or two buildings, but we have, 1,000 buildings, because now our employees, all of their homes are now their offices, and what that looks like for us today. So Tim's saying, everybody has to work from home. And so if we're mandated to work from home, I wonder, I kind of put it out there, I don't have the answer, but I wonder what that means for us in FM and what our umbrella of coverage should be, and should we be more involved in making sure that people's home spaces are really safe and healthy and productive. And that's your 10-minute lesson. So as I sort of wrap up here, I really want to thank all of you who have been participating and been involved in these 10-minute lessons. This is the last of our series of 5, but don't worry, I'll be back with some more probably in December. We'll take a little break, get some ideas, and I'm happy to hear ideas if you have any. And I also wanted to share with you some other teachings that I'm doing. If you are interested in the IFMA FMP course, there's a virtual class that's going to start in November. There's 4 modules. I'm teaching 2 of them. So you can go to my website. Actually, there's a link for that. And also, I currently am teaching a Pro FM class, and we'll have another one starting in February. So if any of these little nuggets are of interest to you, and you're thinking you might like to earn that credential, there's more information there available also. So that's all I have. Again, thank you all so much for participating and being here. If anyone wants to stay on to have a little quick chat, that's great. Otherwise, we'll see you in like another month or so, and we'll be back out there to do more 10-minute lessons. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alana.
Thanks, Alana.
My pleasure.